So we talked about a little bit about this theme of temple.
Right?
7 temples you mentioned that you'd like to kind of draw our attention to.
Right?
The first one is creation is really a temple.
It's a temple, right?
And that is an eye-opening kind of, it causes us to look at a lot of issues and a lot of things differently.
And
I think you were saying that even Genesis 1 and 2, just looking at reading those chapters from that lens, that creation is God's temple that he's filling with his presence.
Right. And you see, God came down on that occasion in Genesis, as you're aware. God gave instructions to Adam and Eve. And that's where, since we are made in the image of God, every one of us has sovereignty.
Okay.
Which is the power and authority to make choices. But every choice has a consequence. And God, in his love, warned Adam and Eve, don't eat of this tree.
Right.
So real freedom to choose must be selected, made in the boundaries that God has established. But Adam and Eve disregarded that because of the influence of the evil one, the tempter on that occasion, and so they were kicked out of the temple, basically kicked out of the garden, and they were not allowed to come back. But when they sinned, we see in God a God of grace.
Absolutely.
He didn't said you would die, but he didn't physically allow them to die. The death basically was they were separated from God. Basically, when people are separated from God, they're in a slow death. And the more and more they serve the evil one, the further and further they get away from God. And so that's what happened there. And God, in his grace and mercy, said, devil, is going to come one, Genesis 3:15,
Right.
who's going to bruise my heel, but I'll stomp his head. I will do away with him.
Yeah.
So the whole Bible permeates with this theme that yes, man is made in the image of God, in his likeness, has an assignment. He failed in his assignment, and from that point on, it's sort of a tragic history. But God, as he did in Genesis 3:15, shows mercy. He leads them, he guides them, and of course we know it goes through a period of time where sins enters and murder takes place and all that goes on until finally God has to send judgment upon the earth, because God's judgment for the purpose of restoring it back to its purpose. And they neglected God, and whether it be through the Tower of Babel, whether through the fall or whatever it might be, the flood and the Babel, the two major things.
Right.
And then, lo and behold, God decided, I'm going to turn things around.
Yeah.
These people can't make it on their own, and that just fulfills what Romans says. All are with sin.
Right.
And so God proceeds, and he chooses Abraham.
Right.
And that's a theme that could be followed through, but we don't have time to go through. But the next thing is, God then comes down after he redeems Abraham and the children of Israel from slavery in Egypt and brings them out and brings them to Mount Sinai. And at Mount Sinai is a second temple where God tells Moses how to build the temple, and it must be built according to specifications, according to the prepared design that God has already established. And so Moses is faithful, along with the workmen, and accomplished that. And so you now have a new temple, which is a tent.
Yeah.
Because God is going to lead his people. That says to us, no matter where we go, we can still carry the glory of God.
Yeah.
Because God now lives in us as believers. That's another temple we'll look at. But he is going to lead us.
Yeah.
The wilderness, they were led by the fire. They were led by the cloud.
Right.
Provision was given to them. All of God's graciousness is manifested to man. And so this second temple, which is called the Tabernacle in the wilderness, is mobile because the people have to be mobile.
Because God is on the move.
And God's on the move too.
Right.
And so even if you're built in a house, you've got to be careful that you sense God if he wants you to move out.
Right.
So that's a little bit different, but that's the wonderful thing about it.
You made the point to me, off camera, that one of the things this illustrates is that we oftentimes, again, focus on maybe the different consequences of sin. But one of the second temple shows us in the wilderness that one of the consequences of sin was not that God said, well, I don't want to dwell with you anymore. Because you've got people who are in a pattern of sin, but God responds to that by going after them and continuing to insist that I want to dwell with you.
Yeah. He will never leave us or forsake us. He's
Right.
the covenant-keeping God.
And so it's His grace overcoming man's
Right.
sin. And I think the different way of thinking about sin when you keep Genesis in the original couple of chapters is not breaking of a law or things that we shouldn't do or the kind of things we think about when we think about sin a lot of times, but it's a failure of our mission, our vocation, which is to reflect God
That's true.
and just bear God's image.
And so basically, when it comes to this tabernacle, God says again, just like He did in Genesis, I want to come down and dwell with them. Exodus 25:8.
Yeah.
He said, let them make a sanctuary. For what purpose? That I may dwell among them.
It's really good.
And of course, that sanctuary, when they were camped, the tabernacles were right there in the middle. And then when they moved out, they moved with the cloud or the fire leading them.
Yeah.
And the whole encampment moved along with it.
So it just you can just keep making applications to us that we're people who make room for God to dwell, and we center our life around God's presence
Right.
in our midst as the people of God.
Yeah, basically,
Very
and
good.
of course, we attend a church that highlights the presence of God. And
Right.
like Moses said, if your presence don't go with me, I'm not going.
That's what it means to be the people of God.
That's right.
Well, that's really good. Well, we'll keep it up.
All right.